The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the cramped office of the Department of Homeland Security's Language Services Division. Rachel Morrison adjusted her headset and glanced at the clock. 3:47 a.m. Another sleepless night translating intercepted communications that mostly turned out to be grocery lists and complaints about the weather. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. At 28, Rachel had already spent 6 years buried in this windowless basement in downtown Washington, D.C., her linguistics degree from Georgetown putting her fluency in Arabic, Farsi, and Urdu to work for national security. Her colleagues knew her as the quiet woman who could decipher dialects from 17 different Middle Eastern regions, but who rarely spoke up in meetings. The red light on her console blinked urgently. Priority intercept. Rachel's fingers moved across her keyboard, pulling up the encrypted audio file that had just arrived from a surveillance operation in Detroit. She pressed play and immediately recognized the Syrian dialect, but something was different about this conversation. Two men were discussing a shipment arriving at the port of Baltimore in 3 days. But they weren't talking about drugs or weapons. They were talking about people. 5 people, specifically. And they kept using a phrase that made Rachel's blood run cold. The final gifts. Control, this is Station 7, Rachel spoke into her microphone. I need to flag this intercept for immediate review. The voice that crackled back belonged to Deputy Director Marcus Webb, a career intelligence officer who had been working nights more frequently since the recent uptick in chatter across multiple terrorist networks. What have you got, Morrison? 2 subjects discussing an operation scheduled for this Friday. They're referencing 5 individuals arriving via maritime route. The terminology suggests, well, sir, it suggests a coordinated attack using human assets. Webb was quiet for a moment. Send me your translation. Full transcript. I'll be down in 5 minutes. Rachel's fingers flew across the keyboard, translating not just the words but the subtle inflections that revealed the speaker's regional backgrounds, their level of education, their emotional states. This wasn't her first intercept suggesting terrorist activity, but something about the calm, methodical way these men discussed their plans sent chills down her spine. When Webb arrived, his usually composed demeanor showed cracks of concern. At 52, he had seen enough genuine threats to distinguish them from the false alarms that consumed most of their resources. "You're certain about this translation?" he asked, reading over Rachel's shoulder. "Absolutely. The first speaker has a Damascus accent but lived in Lebanon for an extended period. Probably Bekaa Valley. The second is definitely Iraqi, likely from Mosul. They're both educated, probably university level. And Deputy Director..." Rachel paused, highlighting a specific section of her transcript. They mentioned a name. Someone called the engineer. Webb's expression darkened. The engineer was a ghost in their files, a bomb maker whose signature had appeared in attacks from Kabul to London, but who had never been identified or captured. "I'm escalating this to the Joint Terrorism Task Force," Webb said. "Good work, Morrison. How confident are you in the timeline?" "Very confident. They specifically mentioned Friday and referenced the morning prayers. That suggests an early morning operation, probably between 5 and 7 a.m. 3 days from now," Webb was already reaching for his phone. "I need you to go through every intercept from the past 2 weeks. Anything that mentions Baltimore, shipping, or uses similar terminology to what you heard tonight." As Webb left to make his calls, Rachel pulled up the archived intercepts. She had a photographic memory for languages and could recall conversations from months ago if they contained unusual phrases or syntax. It was a skill that had made her invaluable to the department, but had also isolated her from her colleagues who found her intensity unsettling. 2 hours later, she had found 3 additional conversations, all from different surveillance operations, all mentioning Friday, all using coded language that, when pieced together, painted a picture of something much larger than a single attack. Her secure phone rang. Webb's voice was tense. "Morrison, I need you upstairs. Conference room 3. We're briefing the Assistant Secretary in 20 minutes, and I need you to walk through everything you found." Rachel had never been in Conference room 3. It was where the department's senior leadership met to discuss matters of national security. As she gathered her files and translations, she caught her reflection in the dark computer screen. Her brown hair was pulled back in its usual practical ponytail, and her tired eyes betrayed the long hours she'd been working. The conference room was filled with people she recognized only from department directories. Assistant Secretary Patricia Holmes sat at the head of the table, flanked by representatives from the FBI, CIA, and NSA. Rachel had never spoken to anyone above Webb's level, and suddenly felt very aware of her rumpled cardigan and the coffee stain on her sleeve. Dr. Morrison, Assistant Secretary Holmes began, using Rachel's academic title rather than her government rank. Deputy Director Webb tells me you've uncovered intelligence suggesting an imminent terrorist operation. Rachel's voice was steady despite her nervousness. Yes, ma'am. Based on 4 separate intercepts over the past 18 days, I believe there's a coordinated operation planned for Friday morning involving 5 suicide bombers arriving via the port of Baltimore. She walked through each translation, explaining not just what was said but how regional dialects and speech patterns revealed information about the speakers' backgrounds and intentions. The room was silent except for the scratch of pens on notepads. The concerning element, Rachel continued, is the level of operational security in these communications. These aren't amateurs. They're using coded language that suggests military or intelligence training. Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI leaned forward. Dr. Morrison, in your professional opinion, what's the likelihood that these intercepts represent a genuine threat rather than disinformation or misdirection? Rachel had been dreading this question. In her 6 years of translation work, she had flagged dozens of potential threats. Most turned out to be nothing. Criminal enterprises, personal disputes, or simply misunderstood conversations. But this felt different. Agent Chen, I've translated approximately 4,000 hours of intercepted communications during my tenure here. This is the first time I've encountered this level of operational sophistication combined with such specific logistical details. The linguistic patterns suggest these individuals have worked together before and are executing a well-rehearsed plan. Assistant Secretary Holmes closed her folder. Dr. Morrison, effective immediately, you're being reassigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force as lead linguistic analyst for this operation. You'll coordinate with our field teams and provide real-time translation support as we investigate this threat. Rachel felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with terror. She had spent her entire career in the safety of translation booths and conference rooms. The idea of being involved in active field operations was both thrilling and terrifying. Ma'am, I should mention that I've never worked in an operational capacity. My experience is entirely analytical. Dr. Morrison, Holmes replied. Based on what you've presented here tonight, you may be the only person in this building who truly understands what we're facing. Your analytical skills are exactly what we need. As the meeting dispersed, Webb approached Rachel with a folder marked Classified, Eyes Only. Your new credentials and operational protocols, he explained. You'll be working directly with Special Agent David Patterson from the FBI's Counterterrorism Division. He's a running point on the field investigation. Rachel opened the folder to find a photo of a man in his early 40s with piercing blue eyes and graying temples. His service record showed extensive experience in international counterterrorism, including operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. One more thing, Morrison, Webb said, lowering his voice. What you've uncovered tonight, if you're right about this, you may have just prevented one of the largest terrorist attacks on American soil since 9/11. But that also means you're now a target. The Bureau is arranging protective detail. As Rachel walked back to her basement office to gather her personal items, the weight of the situation began to settle on her shoulders. 48 hours ago, she had been an anonymous government translator working night shifts in relative obscurity. Now she was the key analyst in a race against time to prevent mass casualties. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Looking forward to working with you, Agent Patterson. Briefing tomorrow 0600. Bring everything. Rachel looked around her small office one last time. The corkboard was covered with linguistic reference charts, the stack of Arabic dictionaries, the photo of her graduation from Georgetown, where she had first fallen in love with Middle Eastern languages and cultures. She had become a translator because she believed that understanding between cultures could prevent conflicts. Now she was about to discover just how much was at stake when understanding failed, and whether her skills could make the difference between prevention and catastrophe. Special Agent David Patterson's office occupied the 15th floor of the J. Edgar Hoover building, its windows offering a view of Pennsylvania Avenue that Rachel had only seen in movies. At exactly 6 a.m., she sat across from him, her laptop open to the intercept files that had started everything. Patterson was different from what she had expected. Where she had imagined someone intense and militaristic, she found a man who spoke in measured tones and seemed genuinely interested in understanding the nuances of her translations. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dr. Morrison, I've read your preliminary analysis 3 times, he began, sliding a cup of coffee across his desk. What strikes me is the sophistication of the operational security. In 15 years of counterterrorism work, I've rarely seen this level of discipline in communications. Rachel pulled up the audio files on her laptop. Agent Patterson, there's something else I discovered last night while reviewing the metadata. These intercepts didn't come from random surveillance. They came from targeted operations against 3 separate cells that we've been monitoring for months. Patterson's expression shifted. Separate cells? Yes, the Damascus accent speaker was recorded during surveillance of a suspected money laundering operation in Dearborn, Michigan. The Iraqi speaker was captured during an investigation into a community center in Baltimore that we suspected of radicalization activities. But here's what's troubling. According to our files, these 2 men have never met. She clicked through her analysis, showing Patterson communication patterns and surveillance logs. Yet they're discussing operational details with the familiarity of people who've worked together extensively. Patterson was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents. Dr. Morrison, are you suggesting that our separate investigations have actually been tracking connected operations? I'm suggesting something more concerning than that. Rachel hesitated, knowing that what she was about to say would fundamentally change how they viewed this threat. I think we're not just dealing with a terrorist cell. I think we're dealing with someone inside our own intelligence apparatus. The words hung in the air between them. Patterson set down his coffee cup and leaned back in his chair. That's a serious allegation, Dr. Morrison. Walk me through your reasoning. Rachel opened a new file on her laptop. The timing of these communications is too precise. Each conversation occurred within hours of our surveillance teams being deployed to new locations. It's as if someone is coordinating these calls to coincide with our monitoring capabilities. You think they want us to intercept these communications? I think someone wants us to intercept specific communications while missing others. Rachel's fingers moved across her keyboard, pulling up a complex analysis she had been working on since 3 a.m. Agent Patterson, I've been analyzing speech patterns and background audio from these intercepts. Listen to this. She played a segment where the Damascus accent speaker mentioned meeting times. In the background, barely audible, was the sound of a television news broadcast. CNN International Arabic Service, Rachel explained. Specifically, a report about increased security measures at American ports. This conversation took place 6 hours after that news segment aired. Patterson was beginning to understand. They're responding to our own security briefings. Exactly. But here's what really concerns me. Rachel pulled up another file. I ran voice recognition software on all 4 speakers from the intercepts. 2 of them have been in our surveillance files for over 18 months. But the other 2? They appeared in our database for the first time 2 weeks ago. New players? Or old players with new identities? Agent Patterson, I think we're being fed information designed to make us focus on the wrong threat at the wrong time. Patterson stood and walked to his window, looking out at the morning traffic beginning to build on Pennsylvania Avenue. Dr. Morrison, if you're right about this, it means someone with access to classified surveillance operations is actively working against us. There's more. Rachel's voice was steady, but Patterson could hear the tension underneath. I traced the routing data on these intercepts. They didn't come through standard NSA collection protocols. They came through a secondary channel that bypasses normal vetting procedures. What kind of secondary channel? The kind that requires authorization from someone at the assistant secretary level or higher. Patterson turned from the window, his expression grim. Dr. Morrison, are you telling me that someone in senior leadership is compromised? I'm telling you that someone with high-level access is manipulating intelligence to serve an agenda we don't understand yet. Patterson's secure phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and his jaw tightened. Dr. Morrison, I need you to step outside for a moment. This conversation is classified above your current clearance level. Rachel gathered her laptop and files, but as she reached the door, Patterson called her name. Dr. Morrison, everything you've just told me stays between us until I can verify your analysis independently. If you're right about there being an insider threat, we can't trust normal channels. Rachel nodded and stepped into the hallway, her mind racing. In the space of 12 hours, she had gone from translating routine intercepts to potentially uncovering a conspiracy within the intelligence community itself. 20 minutes later, Patterson emerged from his office, his face pale. "Dr. Morrison, we need to talk. Somewhere private." He led her to a small conference room and activated a white noise generator. "That call was from my supervisor. The Baltimore operation has been moved up. It's happening today." "Today?" But the intercepts clearly indicated Friday. "That's what I thought too. But according to new intelligence that came in this morning, the timeline has accelerated. There are reports of suspicious activity at the Inner Harbor area. Multiple agencies are being deployed." Rachel felt a chill of realization. "Agent Patterson, what if the Friday timeline was deliberate misdirection? What if someone wanted our resources focused on the wrong day so that the real operation could proceed without interference?" Patterson was already reaching for his phone. "I'm calling this in. We need to—" "Wait." Rachel grabbed his arm. "If I'm right about the insider threat, calling this through normal channels could compromise whatever response we're planning. We need to verify the source of this new intelligence first." Patterson studied her face. "Dr. Morrison, you're asking me to potentially ignore a direct order from my chain of command based on linguistic analysis and metadata. I'm asking you to consider that everything we think we know about this threat might be wrong." Before Patterson could respond, his phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Multiple agencies were being deployed to the Baltimore Inner Harbor. All available counterterrorism assets were being redirected to support the operation. "Agent Patterson," Rachel said quietly, "if this is a diversion, what's the real target?" Patterson was silent for a moment, then began typing rapidly on his secure terminal. "Dr. Morrison, I'm going to share something with you that's going to change your security clearance permanently. Are you prepared for that?" Rachel nodded. "For the past 6 months, we've been tracking intelligence suggesting that a high-value target, someone we've been hunting for years, is planning to enter the United States, someone with the expertise to coordinate exactly the kind of sophisticated operation you've described." "The engineer?" Patterson's surprise was evident. "How did you—" "It was in one of the intercepts. They mentioned him by name." Patterson pulled up a classified file on his screen. "Dr. Morrison, the engineer isn't just a bomb maker. According to our intelligence, he's a former American intelligence officer who went rogue 15 years ago. Someone with intimate knowledge of our surveillance capabilities, our response protocols, and our personnel." Rachel stared at the file photo, a man in his 50s with graying hair and cold eyes. Below the photo was a list of suspected operations spanning 3 continents. "Agent Patterson, if the engineer has inside knowledge of our systems, he could orchestrate exactly the kind of misdirection we're seeing. He could feed us intelligence designed to draw our attention away from his real objective. And if our response to Baltimore is exactly what he's counting on—" Rachel finished the thought, "then we're not just failing to stop his operation, we're actively helping him execute it." Patterson closed the file and looked directly at Rachel. "Dr. Morrison, I'm about to make a decision that could end my career. I'm going to recommend that we operate outside normal channels until we can determine who we can trust." "What does that mean?" "It means you and I are going to investigate this threat independently, using only resources we can personally verify. And it means that as of right now, you're not just a translator anymore, you're an intelligence operative." Rachel felt the weight of that statement. In 48 hours, her entire life had changed. But as she looked at the evidence spread across Patterson's desk, she realized that her linguistic skills might be the only thing standing between the engineer and whatever he was really planning. "Agent Patterson, where do we start?" Patterson was already gathering his equipment. "We start by figuring out what the engineer really wants. And we better figure it out fast, because while everyone else is chasing ghosts in Baltimore, he's about to get exactly what he came for." The safe house in Arlington was nothing like the sterile government offices Rachel was accustomed to. Located in a nondescript suburban neighborhood, it looked like any other middle-class home from the outside. Inside, however, banks of surveillance equipment and secure communication devices revealed its true purpose. Patterson had driven them there using counter-surveillance techniques that made Rachel carsick. Sudden turns, doubled back routes, and stops in parking garages to check for followers. The gravity of their situation was becoming increasingly clear. They were now operating as if their own government might be hunting them. "Dr. Morrison, I need you to understand something," Patterson said as he activated the house's security systems. "What we're about to do goes against everything I've been trained to do in 15 years of federal service. We're about to investigate our own people based on linguistic analysis and circumstantial evidence." Rachel set up her laptop on the dining room table, which had been converted into a makeshift command center. "Agent Patterson, in academic linguistics we have a concept called negative space analysis. Sometimes what's not said is more important than what is said. Someone is creating negative space in our intelligence, gaps designed to hide the real operation." "Show me what you mean." Rachel pulled up a map of the eastern seaboard on her computer. "Every intercept we've captured mentions Baltimore, but look at the shipping routes." She traced lines on the map with her finger. "If you were really planning to bring people into the country via maritime routes, Baltimore is actually one of the most heavily monitored ports on the East Coast." "So where would you bring them in?" "Norfolk, Virginia. Smaller commercial port, less federal oversight, and it's connected to the same highway system that would get you to Washington, D.C. in under 3 hours. Patterson studied the map, but our intelligence consistently points to Baltimore." "Exactly. Which means someone wants us looking at Baltimore, while the real operation happens elsewhere." Rachel opened another file. "Agent Patterson, I've been analyzing the background audio from all our intercepts. Listen to this." She played a conversation where ships' horns could be heard in the distance. This was supposedly recorded in Detroit, but those horn patterns? They're from Norfolk Naval Station. I spent 2 summers there during college, working on a linguistics research project with Navy personnel. Patterson's expression darkened. "You're saying the intercepts themselves are fabricated?" "I'm saying someone with access to our surveillance operations recorded conversations in Norfolk but tagged them as coming from Detroit and Baltimore. Someone who knows exactly how our intelligence analysis works and how to exploit our assumptions." Before Patterson could respond, an encrypted message appeared on his secure device. His face went pale as he read it. "Dr. Morrison, we have a problem. The Baltimore operation just went sideways. 3 federal agents are dead, and they found evidence that the suspected terrorists were actually undercover CIA operatives." Rachel felt the room spin slightly. "Agent Patterson, that means someone set up our own people to be killed by our own people. This isn't just about terrorism anymore. This is about eliminating anyone who might be getting too close to the truth." Rachel's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Dr. Morrison, you have 12 hours to cease your investigation or there will be consequences. The engineer knows who you are." Patterson read the message over her shoulder. "We need to move, now." "Wait." Rachel was typing rapidly on her laptop. "Agent Patterson, if the engineer knows about me, he's been monitoring our communications. Which means he knows we're here. How is that possible? This location is classified above your clearance level." Rachel's analysis was revealing a terrifying pattern. Because he's not just monitoring us, he's directing the investigation from inside the system. She turned her laptop screen toward Patterson. "Look at the communication logs. Every time we've made a discovery, there's been a corresponding shift in the official intelligence. It's as if someone is staying one step ahead by watching our progress and adjusting accordingly." Patterson was already gathering their equipment. "Dr. Morrison, if you're right, then everyone we trust could be compromised." "Not everyone." Rachel pulled up a personnel file. "Agent Patterson, what do you know about Deputy Director Webb?" "Webb? He's your supervisor, isn't he? 20-year intelligence veteran. Sterling record. He's also the one person who has never had advanced knowledge of what I was going to discover. I've been reporting to him after my analysis, not before." Rachel's fingers flew across the keyboard. "And look at this. Webb has been systematically excluded from high-level briefings about this operation." "You think Webb is clean?" "I think Webb is being isolated because someone knows he can't be compromised." Patterson's secure phone rang. The caller ID showed Deputy Director Webb. "Agent Patterson, this is Webb. I need to speak with Dr. Morrison immediately. We have a situation." Patterson activated the speaker function. "Deputy Director, Dr. Morrison is here. What's the situation?" Webb's voice was tense. "Agent Patterson, Dr. Morrison's apartment was firebombed 20 minutes ago. Her sister's house in Philadelphia was broken into, and her parents are missing from their home in Ohio. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. My family? They can't be involved in this. Dr. Morrison, they're being used as leverage. We received a communication demanding that you turn yourself in within 6 hours, or your family will be killed. Patterson was already moving toward the weapons locker. Deputy Director, what's your assessment of the threat's credibility? Agent Patterson. The communication included photographs of Dr. Morrison's family members and detailed information about their daily routines. This is a credible threat. Rachel slumped into a chair, the weight of the situation overwhelming her. Deputy Director Webb, this is my fault. I should have never. Dr. Morrison, Webb interrupted, this is exactly what they want. They want you to feel responsible, to make decisions based on emotion rather than analysis. What did your linguistic training teach you about negotiation under duress? Rachel took a deep breath, forcing herself to think analytically. That the person making demands always reveals information about their own priorities and limitations. Exactly, so what does this demand tell us about the engineer's situation? Rachel considered the question. He's operating under time pressure. If he had unlimited time, he wouldn't need to threaten my family, he would just eliminate me. And what does that suggest about his real operation? Rachel's mind began working through the implications. It suggests that whatever he's really planning has a fixed timeline that can't be adjusted. Something that has to happen at a specific time and place. Patterson was studying a calendar on his laptop. Dr. Morrison, what's happening in Washington, D.C. this week that would be significant enough to risk this level of exposure? Rachel's eyes widened as she realized the answer. The Middle East Peace Summit. Tomorrow night, every major leader from the region will be in one location. Webb's voice came through the speaker with grim certainty. Dr. Morrison, I think you've just identified the engineer's real target. But Deputy Director, Patterson interjected, that summit has the highest level of security coordination in recent history. Every intelligence agency in the country is involved. Which means, Rachel said quietly, that the engineer has access to every security protocol, every evacuation plan, and every response procedure. The room was silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just dealing with a terrorist attack. They were dealing with someone who had spent months, possibly years, positioning himself to strike at the heart of American foreign policy while using the country's own security apparatus to ensure his success. Dr. Morrison, Webb's voice broke the silence. We need to know, can you identify the engineer's voice if you hear it? If he's been the one coordinating these communications, yes. Voice pattern analysis is one of my specialties. Then we're going to set a trap. Agent Patterson, bring Dr. Morrison to the summit security briefing this evening. We're going to flush the engineer out by giving him exactly what he wants, access to you in a controlled environment. Rachel looked at Patterson, who was checking his weapon and gathering tactical equipment. Agent Patterson, what about my family? Patterson's expression was grim but determined. Dr. Morrison, the best way to save your family is to stop the engineer before he can execute his plan. Because if he succeeds tomorrow night, your family won't be the only casualties. As they prepared to leave the safe house, Rachel realized that her life as a quiet government translator was over forever. In 3 days, she had discovered a conspiracy, became a target, and now she was about to walk into what could be a carefully orchestrated trap. But she also realized something else. Her unique skills might be the only thing that could prevent an international catastrophe. The engineer had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated the woman he had dismissed as just a translator. Walter E. Washington Convention Center buzzed with activity as security teams from 17 different agencies prepared for the Middle East Peace Summit. Rachel and Patterson arrived separately, their cover story established. She was there as a linguistic consultant to review translation protocols, while he was conducting routine security assessments. Rachel's new credentials identified her as Dr. Sarah Chen, a freelance linguistics expert from the State Department. The false identity felt strange, but Webb had insisted that the engineer would be monitoring personnel lists for her real name. The main briefing room was a maze of temporary workstations where analysts reviewed threat assessments, coordinated security sweeps, and managed communication protocols. Rachel positioned herself at a translation station near the center of the room, where she could observe and listen to conversations from multiple agencies. Within the first hour, she had identified 12 different regional accents among the security personnel, not unusual for an international operation, but her trained ear was cataloging voice patterns and speech rhythms that might help her identify the engineer when he revealed himself. "Dr. Chen," a voice called from behind her. Rachel turned to see a man in his early 50s approaching with a coffee cup and a friendly smile. "I'm Colonel James Mitchell, Defense Intelligence Agency. I understand you're here to review our Arabic translation protocols?" Rachel's blood ran cold. The voice was perfectly American, but her linguistic training detected something else. Micro-accents that suggested this man had spent significant time in the Middle East, specifically Syria and Iraq. More importantly, his speech patterns matched elements she had heard in the intercepted communications. "Colonel Mitchell, yes, I'm reviewing the protocols to ensure accuracy in real-time translation." Rachel kept her voice steady while her mind raced. "Have we worked together before? Your voice sounds familiar." Mitchell's smile never wavered, but Rachel caught a brief flicker of calculation in his eyes. "I don't believe so, Dr. Chen. Though I've worked with many linguists over the years. The Defense Intelligence Agency values accurate translation above all else." "Of course. What regions have you specialized in?" "Oh, you know how intelligence works, wherever the mission takes you." Mitchell's deflection was smooth, but Rachel noticed he had unconsciously shifted his stance, a subtle change that suggested increased alertness. Patterson appeared at Rachel's workstation carrying a stack of security assessments. "Dr. Chen, I need your review on these communication intercepts when you have a moment." Mitchell excused himself and moved toward a group of senior officials near the main briefing screen. Rachel watched him carefully, noting how he positioned himself where he could observe most of the room while maintaining easy access to multiple exits. "Agent Patterson," Rachel whispered as she pretended to review the documents. "I think I just met the engineer." Patterson's expression didn't change, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Which one?" "Colonel Mitchell, DIA." His vocal patterns match elements from the intercepts, and his body language shifted when I asked about his background. "Mitchell has been cleared at the highest levels. His credentials are impeccable, which would make him the perfect inside asset." Rachel continued working while keeping Mitchell in her peripheral vision. "Agent Patterson, I need access to DIA personnel files. If Mitchell is the engineer, there should be inconsistencies in his background that a linguistics analysis might reveal." Patterson was already typing on his secure tablet. "I can get you limited access through the Joint Task Force database. What are you looking for?" "Educational background, overseas assignments, any gaps in his service record that might indicate deep cover operations." Rachel paused as she noticed something troubling. Agent Patterson Mitchell is moving toward the secure communications area. "If he has access to our operational frequencies." They watched as Mitchell approached the communication station, where real-time intelligence was being coordinated. He spoke briefly with the operators, who immediately granted him access to their systems. "Dr. Chen," a new voice interrupted Rachel's observation. She turned to see Assistant Secretary Holmes approaching with a worried expression. "I need to speak with you privately." Holmes led Rachel to a small conference room adjacent to the main briefing area. "Dr. Chen, we've received intelligence that there may be a security breach in this operation. Someone with access to classified protocols may be working against us." Rachel studied Holmes' face carefully. Was this a genuine warning, or was Holmes testing her knowledge? "Ma'am, what kind of security breach?" "The kind that could compromise the entire summit." "Dr. Chen, your linguistic analysis has been invaluable, but I'm concerned that your investigation may have attracted unwanted attention." "Unwanted attention from whom?" Holmes closed the door and activated a white noise generator. "Dr. Chen, I'm going to share something with you that's classified at the highest levels. We believe the engineer has been using the summit planning process to position assets for an assassination attempt." Rachel's heart pounded, but she forced herself to remain calm. "An assassination attempt on which leader?" "All of them." Holmes pulled up a secure file on her tablet. "Dr. Chen, if our intelligence is correct, the engineer isn't planning a bombing or conventional attack. He's planning to eliminate the entire leadership of the Middle East peace process in a single operation." Rachel stared at the briefing document, which outlined security protocols for each delegation. Assistant Secretary Holmes, how would someone execute an operation of that magnitude? By having access to every security protocol, every evacuation plan, and every emergency response procedure. Holmes' voice was grim. Dr. Chen, the engineer, has been inside our planning process from the beginning, which means he knows every countermeasure we've developed. Exactly. Which is why I need your help with something unconventional. Holmes opened another file. Dr. Chen, we're going to use your linguistic skills in a way that's never been attempted before. The file contained detailed dossiers on each Middle Eastern leader attending the summit, including personal background information, security details, and communication preferences. Assistant Secretary Holmes, I don't understand. Dr. Chen, we're going to have you conduct real-time linguistic analysis during the summit itself. You'll be monitoring all communications, not just English and Arabic, but every language being used by the various delegations. Rachel realized the scope of what Holmes was proposing. You want me to identify the engineer's voice during the actual summit? More than that. We want you to identify any communications that don't belong. Voices, accents, or linguistic patterns that suggest infiltration or impersonation. That's an enormous responsibility if I miss something. Holmes' expression was serious. Dr. Chen, based on your analysis over the past 3 days, you may be the only person who can identify the engineer's operation before it's too late. Rachel looked through the files, noting security arrangements that seemed almost impossibly complex. Every leader would have multiple layers of protection, with backup protocols for every conceivable scenario. Assistant Secretary Holmes, there's something I need to tell you about Colonel Mitchell. Holmes' attention sharpened. What about Mitchell? His voice patterns suggest extended time in Syria and Iraq, but his official biography doesn't show those assignments. More importantly, his speech contains elements that match our intercepted communications. Holmes was quiet for a moment, then reached for her secure phone. Dr. Chen, I need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't leave this room, don't communicate with anyone, and don't let Mitchell know you've identified him. Assistant Secretary Holmes, is Colonel Mitchell the engineer? Holmes paused at the door. Dr. Chen, Colonel Mitchell died in a car bombing in Baghdad 6 months ago. Whoever that man is, he's not who he claims to be. As Holmes left the room, Rachel felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The engineer hadn't just infiltrated the summit planning. He had assumed the identity of a dead intelligence officer to gain unprecedented access to the operation. Her secure phone buzzed with a message from Patterson. Mitchell just accessed the emergency evacuation protocols for all delegations. We need to move now. Rachel realized that in trying to gather evidence against the engineer, they had run out of time. Tomorrow's summit was less than 18 hours away, and the engineer now had everything he needed to execute his plan. But Rachel also realized something else. By maintaining her cover as Dr. Chen, she was positioned to do something the engineer wouldn't expect. For the first time since this operation began, she might have an advantage. The question was whether she could use that advantage to stop an international catastrophe before the engineer discovered that the woman he had dismissed as just a translator was now the greatest threat to his carefully orchestrated plan. The Peace Summit began at 8 a.m. sharp, with delegations from 14 Middle Eastern nations gathering in the main conference hall. Rachel sat in the translation booth overlooking the assembly, wearing specialized headphones that allowed her to monitor communications across 17 different channels simultaneously. Her official role was linguistic oversight, but her real mission was to identify any voice, accent, or communication pattern that didn't belong. Through the soundproof glass, she watched as world leaders took their seats, each surrounded by their own security details. Dr. Chen, this is Control, Patterson's voice came through her secure earpiece. Mitchell is in a position at the Security Command Center. He has real-time access to all protective details. Rachel adjusted her monitoring equipment, scanning through Arabic, Hebrew, Persian, Turkish, and Kurdish channels. Agent Patterson, I'm picking up standard diplomatic chatter, but something's bothering me about the frequency allocations. What do you mean? Someone has allocated 5 additional communication channels that aren't in the official protocol. They're encrypted, but the carrier frequencies suggest short-range tactical radios. Through her booth window, Rachel could see Mitchell moving between different security stations, his authoritative presence granting him access wherever he went. But her trained eye noticed something else. He was maintaining visual contact with specific points around the perimeter of the hall. Agent Patterson, Mitchell is using hand signals. Very subtle, but he's coordinating with people positioned around the room. How many people? Rachel counted carefully, tracking Mitchell's sight lines and the timing of his gestures. 5 positions, all with clear lines of sight to the main table where the leaders are seated. Her blood ran cold as she realized the significance. 5 suicide bombers, 5 positions. The intercepts had been telling the truth about the number, but wrong about everything else. Agent Patterson, they're not planning to bring bombers into the country. They're already here. Mitchell has positioned them throughout the security perimeter. Dr. Chen, that's impossible. Everyone in this room has been vetted at the highest levels. Rachel was frantically scanning through personnel files on her secure tablet. Agent Patterson, what if the vetting process itself was compromised? What if Mitchell provided false clearances for his assets? Before Patterson could respond, Rachel heard something that made her blood freeze. On one of the encrypted tactical channels, a voice speaking Arabic with a distinctive Mosul accent, the same accent from the original intercepts. Base, this is Position 1. Packages in place, awaiting final authorization. Similar confirmations came from 4 other positions, each in different Arabic dialects that Rachel instantly recognized from her months of analysis. These were the actual voices from the intercepted communications. Agent Patterson, they're here, all 5 of them. They're using the encrypted channels to coordinate. Dr. Chen, where are they positioned? Rachel pulled up the venue's architectural plans on her tablet, cross-referencing the radio signals with the building's layout. Position 1 is in the catering area, Position 2 is with the media pool, Position 3 is integrated with the Israeli security detail, Position 4 is with the maintenance staff, and Position 5. She paused, realizing the horrifying truth. Position 5 is in the translation services area. He's 1 floor below me. Dr. Chen, you need to evacuate immediately. Agent Patterson, if I leave now, I lose the ability to monitor their communications. I'm the only one who can track their coordination in real time. Through her headphones, Rachel heard Mitchell's voice on a secure channel. All positions, prepare for the final phase, execute on my signal. Agent Patterson, it's starting. Mitchell is about to give the execution order. Rachel watched as Mitchell moved to a central position in the security command center, where he had access to the emergency communication systems. If he triggered a false alarm, the resulting evacuation chaos would provide perfect cover for the attack. But then Rachel noticed something Mitchell couldn't have anticipated. The Jordanian delegation had brought their own linguistic specialist, an elderly professor who was fluent in the same Iraqi dialect she was hearing from Position 1. The professor was frowning, clearly listening to communications that shouldn't have been happening. Rachel made a split-second decision that would either save lives or end her own. She activated the emergency override on the translation system, broadcasting her voice directly to every delegation in the room. Attention all delegations. This is Dr. Morrison from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. You are in immediate danger. There are 5 hostile assets positioned throughout this facility, coordinating an attack through encrypted radio communications. The reaction was instant. Security details around the room drew weapons and began moving their principals toward exits. But Mitchell had anticipated this scenario. All positions, execute now. Repeat, execute now. Rachel continued her broadcast, switching between Arabic, Hebrew, and English. Position 1 is in the catering area, Position 2 is with the media pool, Position 3 has infiltrated the Israeli security detail. Gunfire erupted from Position 2 as the media area became a combat zone. Rachel could see security personnel engaging a suspect who had been posing as a cameraman. Position 4 is with maintenance staff in the basement level. Position 5 is in translation services. Rachel's booth door burst open. A man she had never seen before entered, wearing the uniform of building maintenance but speaking into a tactical radio in the Mosul accent she had been tracking. Dr. Morrison, he said in heavily accented English, you have caused considerable difficulty. Rachel backed away from her equipment but kept her microphone active. Your Position 5, you've been coordinating from down here. Very good, Dr. Morrison. Your linguistic skills are as impressive as the engineer told us they would be. Through her headphones, Rachel could hear chaos erupting throughout the building. Security teams were engaging multiple hostiles, but the attackers had been positioned with perfect knowledge of response protocols. "Why?" Rachel asked, trying to keep him talking while emergency responders coordinated their response. "Why target a peace summit?" "Peace?" The man laughed bitterly. "Dr. Morrison, do you know what your country's peace looks like to us? It looks like bombs falling on our children, while your politicians shake hands for the cameras. So you're willing to murder world leaders who are trying to end the violence? We are willing to show the world that American security is an illusion, that your protection of your allies means nothing." Through the soundproof glass, Rachel could see security teams evacuating delegates while engaging the remaining attackers. But she realized that the man in her booth wasn't wearing an explosive vest like the others. He was carrying something different. "Dr. Morrison, Position 5 has a different mission. While my brothers create chaos and eliminate targets, I ensure that the one person who could have prevented this attack does not survive to tell the story." Rachel's secure earpiece crackled with Patterson's voice. "Dr. Chen, we've neutralized 4 hostiles, but we can't locate Position 5. The attacker smiled grimly. "Your agent Patterson is very thorough, but he is looking in the wrong place." Rachel realized that her linguistic analysis had been turned against her. By accurately identifying the attacker's positions, she had drawn security away from her own location, exactly as the engineer had planned. "Dr. Morrison, the engineer sends his regards. He says to tell you that you were never just a translator, you were always the target." But as the attacker raised his weapon, Rachel did something that neither he nor the engineer had anticipated. She activated the building's emergency communication system and began speaking in perfect Arabic, using dialect and inflection patterns that identified her as someone with intimate knowledge of Middle Eastern cultures. Her words weren't directed at the security teams or the delegations. They were directed at the attacker himself, spoken in the specific dialect of his home region, invoking cultural and religious concepts that she had learned during her years of study. For the first time since entering her booth, the attacker hesitated. And in that moment of hesitation, Rachel realized that her greatest weapon wasn't just her ability to understand languages, it was her ability to use them. The attacker's hesitation lasted only seconds, but it was enough. Rachel's words in his native dialect had triggered something unexpected. Not just surprise, but recognition. She could see it in his eyes as he processed not just what she had said, but how she had said it. "You spoke of my village," he said in Arabic, his weapon still raised but no longer steady. "How do you know the old prayers of Talafar?" Rachel kept speaking in his dialect, weaving together phrases that demonstrated not just linguistic knowledge, but deep cultural understanding. She spoke of ancient poetry, local customs, and historical references that only someone who had lived among his people would know. "Because I spent 3 years in northern Iraq," she replied in perfect Talafar Arabic. "Not as a soldier or intelligence operative, but as a student. I lived with families like yours. I learned your language not to spy on you, but to understand you." The man's confusion was evident. This wasn't the scenario the engineer had prepared him for. He had been told he was eliminating a government translator who used her skills to help America's war machine. Instead, he was facing someone who spoke to him as if she knew his homeland better than he expected any American could. "You are lying," he said, but his voice carried doubt. "I'm not lying, Ahmad." Rachel had caught his name from radio communications earlier. "I know you're from Talafar because your accent carries the specific inflections of the eastern districts. I know you're educated because your formal Arabic is excellent, probably university level, and I know you're not really a terrorist." Ahmad's weapon wavered. "What do you mean?" Rachel continued in his dialect, but now she was speaking as a linguistic analyst, not just a cultural observer. "Ahmad, your communication patterns throughout this operation have been wrong. You've been following scripts, not speaking naturally. Someone taught you what to say, but they couldn't teach you how to think in the operational language." Through her headphones, she could hear security teams moving through the building, systematically clearing areas and accounting for threats. But she also heard something else. Mitchell's voice, increasingly agitated as his carefully orchestrated plan fell apart. "Position 5, what is your status?" "Execute immediately." Rachel looked directly at Ahmad. "Ahmad, you're not Position 5, are you? You're a replacement." Someone who was brought in when the real Position 5 couldn't complete the mission. Ahmad's expression confirmed her analysis. How did you know? Because the real Position 5 was supposed to be a bomb expert, someone who could disable security systems and create maximum chaos. But you're carrying a simple firearm, and you've been hesitating to use it. You're not a terrorist, Ahmad. You're a victim. Rachel switched to English, knowing that Mitchell could hear her through the communication system. The engineer didn't tell you the truth about this operation, did he? He told you that you were striking back against American imperialism, but he didn't tell you that the real target was never the world leaders. Ahmad was lowering his weapon, confusion replacing determination. What are you talking about? Ahmad, this entire operation was designed to eliminate me. Every aspect of it. The intercepted communications, the false intelligence, even your positioning here, was all designed to ensure that I would be in this room at this moment when someone tried to kill me. Through the emergency communication system, Rachel heard Mitchell's voice echoing through the building. All units, abort mission. Repeat, abort mission. Exfiltration protocol is in effect. But Rachel wasn't finished. She activated the building's security alert system and began speaking in multiple languages, addressing not just the security teams but the delegates who were still being evacuated. This is Dr. Rachel Morrison, Department of Homeland Security. Colonel James Mitchell is not who he claims to be. He is a rogue intelligence operative known as the Engineer, and he has been using this summit as cover for an assassination operation. Ahmad stared at her. You are Dr. Morrison? The one he told us about? Ahmad, what exactly did he tell you about me? He said you were a propaganda specialist who helped the American military target our communities. He said you used your language skills to identify targets for drone strikes. Rachel felt a chill of understanding. Ahmad, I've never worked for the military in a targeting capacity. I'm a translator. I analyze communications to prevent attacks, not to plan them. But the engineer showed us the documents. Forged documents. Ahmad, think about it. If I was really involved in targeting your people, why would I have learned your village customs and your local prayers? Why would I speak to you with respect for your culture? Ahmad was beginning to lower his weapon completely. He said that eliminating you would prevent future attacks on our homeland. Ahmad, the only attack being prevented here is the engineer's attack on international peace negotiations. He's been using you and your friends to eliminate the one person who could expose his real operation. Through the building's security system, Rachel could hear Mitchell's voice growing more desperate as teams closed in on his position. But she also heard something else that made her blood run cold. Explosions coming from the basement level. Ahmad, the engineer isn't evacuating your friends. He's eliminating them to cover his tracks. Ahmad's face went pale as the implications hit him. Kareem and Hassan, they were supposed to meet at the extraction point. There is no extraction point, Ahmad. The engineer has been planning to eliminate all witnesses from the beginning. Ahmad was now pointing his weapon toward the floor, his entire worldview collapsing. We were told this was martyrdom, that we would escape to continue the fight. Ahmad, you were told lies by someone who has been manipulating intelligence operations for his own purposes. The question now is whether you're going to help me stop him before he disappears forever. Rachel's secure earpiece crackled with Patterson's voice. Dr. Morrison, we've lost Mitchell. He's no longer at the command center, and we believe he's heading for the roof extraction point. Ahmad looked up sharply. The roof? There's a helicopter coming. How did you know about the helicopter? Because that was our real extraction plan. The engineer told us that if the operation went wrong, we should reach the roof for emergency evacuation. Rachel realized that Mitchell had been planning to use Ahmad and the others as human shields during his escape, then eliminate them once he was safely airborne. Ahmad, if you help me reach that roof, we might be able to save your friends and stop the engineer before he escapes. Ahmad studied her face, searching for deception. Why would you want to save my friends? They came here to kill your people. Because they came here based on lies, just like you did, and because stopping the engineer is more important than revenge. Ahmad made his decision. Dr. Morrison, I know the building's service routes. I can get you to the roof without using the main elevators. As they moved toward the service stairs, Rachel realized that her linguistic skills had accomplished something unprecedented, not just preventing an attack, but converting an attacker into an ally. But the most dangerous part of the operation was still ahead. The engineer was making his escape, and he still had Ahmad's friends with him as potential hostages. If Rachel was going to stop him, she would need to use every skill she had learned, not just as a translator, but as someone who understood that language could be the difference between war and peace. The race to the roof had begun, and everything depended on whether Rachel could talk down 5 suicide bombers in perfect Arabic before the engineer disappeared forever. The service stairwell echoed with their footsteps as Rachel and Ahmad climbed toward the roof. Ahmad moved with the efficiency of someone familiar with the building's layout, while Rachel's mind raced through everything she knew about the remaining operatives' psychological profiles based on their speech patterns. "Ahmad, tell me about your friends," she said as they reached the 15th floor. Their backgrounds, their families, what the engineer told them about this mission. "Kareem is from Mosul, like the voice you identified. He lost his entire family in a bombing 3 years ago. Hassan is from Aleppo. His village was destroyed. Mahmoud and Faisal are brothers from Damascus." Rachel processed this information while analyzing the tactical situation. "Ahmad, they all have legitimate grievances against forces they believe I represent. The engineer chose them specifically because their anger would make them resistant to negotiation." They reached the roof access door. Ahmad pulled out a key card, evidence that the engineer had provided his operatives with detailed building access. "Dr. Morrison, before we go out there, I need to know something. Can you really save my friends?" Rachel checked her earpiece. Patterson's voice confirmed that the helicopter was already on approach, and Mitchell was on the roof with 4 hostages in explosive vests. "Ahmad, I can't promise to save them, but I can promise that I'll try to give them a choice, the same choice I just gave you." They pushed through the door onto the windswept roof. The Washington, D.C. skyline stretched in all directions, with emergency vehicles converging on the convention center below. In the center of the roof, Mitchell stood next to a helicopter with its rotors spinning, while 4 men in explosive vests knelt nearby with their hands secured behind their backs. Mitchell saw them immediately and drew his weapon. "Dr. Morrison, how refreshing to finally meet you in person." Rachel stepped forward, keeping her hands visible. "You're not Colonel Mitchell, you're Thomas Brennan, formerly of the CIA's Special Activities Division. You went rogue after the Kandahar operation 15 years ago." Mitchell's surprise was brief but telling. "Impressive, Dr. Morrison. Your linguistic analysis identified my original voice patterns, despite my years of practice with Mitchell's accent. Your mistake was using your original regional dialect when you were under stress during radio communications, Boston Irish, specifically South Boston. It's a very distinctive accent pattern. Academic curiosity, Dr. Morrison, or are you trying to delay my departure?" Rachel could see the 4 kneeling men more clearly now. Their expressions showed confusion and fear, but also growing awareness that something wasn't as the engineer had promised. "Thomas, your friends here deserve to know the truth about what you've asked them to do. They know exactly what they're doing. They're striking back against American imperialism." Rachel switched to Arabic, addressing the kneeling men directly. "Kareem, Hassan, Mahmoud, Faisal. My name is Rachel Morrison. I'm the woman the engineer told you was responsible for attacks on your families." Kareem looked up sharply. "You? You are the propaganda woman?" "I'm a translator, Kareem. I study languages because I believe understanding between cultures can prevent wars, not cause them." Mitchell's irritation was evident. "Dr. Morrison, your psychological manipulation won't work. These men have seen the evidence of your crimes." "What evidence, Thomas? Forged documents?" "Fabricated intelligence reports," Rachel continued in Arabic, speaking directly to the operatives. "Kareem, you said you lost your family in a bombing. Where exactly did this happen?" "Mosul, 2018. American drones attacked our neighborhood." Rachel pulled out her secure tablet, accessing databases she had helped create during her years of translation work. "Kareem, the bombing you're referring to was carried out by ISIS forces retreating from coalition advances. I know because I translated the intercepted communications that warned civilians to evacuate that area." Kareem's expression shifted. "That is impossible. The engineer showed us proof." "Hassan," Rachel continued, switching to a Damascus dialect, "you said your village in Aleppo was destroyed, but you're using the wrong regional accent for Aleppo. You're actually from the Ghouta region, aren't you?" Hassan's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "Because I spent months analyzing communications from chemical weapons attacks in Ghouta. I helped identify the perpetrators, Syrian government forces, not the American military." Mitchell was becoming agitated. "Enough. These men know what they're fighting for. Do they, Thomas? Rachel addressed the group again in Arabic. Or do they know what you told them they were fighting for? Ahmad stepped forward, surprising everyone. Brothers, I was where you are 20 minutes ago. She spoke the truth to me. The engineer has been lying to us. Ahmad, Mahmoud called out, you were supposed to complete your mission. My mission was based on lies, brother. She is not who he told us she was. Rachel seized the moment. Karim, Hassan, Mahmoud, Faisal, you came here believing you were striking back against someone who had harmed your families. But what if I told you that the person who really harmed your family is standing right here? She pointed at Mitchell. Thomas Brennan, the engineer. He's the one who provided intelligence that led to mistaken strikes on civilian targets. He's the one who sold weapons to groups that attacked your neighborhoods. He's been profiting from the chaos in your region for 15 years. Mitchell's facade was cracking. Dr. Morrison, you're improvising desperately. Am I, Thomas? Tell them about the Kandahar operation. Tell them why you really went rogue. Mitchell's hesitation was all the confirmation Rachel needed. Karim, Hassan the engineer, went rogue because he was caught selling intelligence to terrorist groups. He wasn't fighting American imperialism, he was profiting from it. The effect on the kneeling men was immediate. Years of anger and grief began redirecting toward Mitchell as they realized the scope of his deception. You told us she was the enemy, Hassan said in Arabic. Rachel continued her linguistic analysis in real time, adjusting her approach for each man's psychological state. Hassan, your family died because people like Thomas sold weapons to the groups that killed them. Karim, your neighborhood was bombed because intelligence like his created the chaos that made accurate targeting impossible. Mitchell was backing toward the helicopter. This changes nothing. Even if you turn them against me, they're still wearing explosive vests. Actually, Thomas, it changes everything. Rachel's voice carried a new confidence. Because these men aren't terrorists. They're victims. And victims can choose justice over revenge. She switched back to Arabic, addressing each man individually in his own dialect. Karim, you have children who are still alive. Mahmoud and Faisal, you have each other. Hassan, you have a chance to rebuild. But only if you choose to remove those vests and live. One by one, the men began working to free their hands from their restraints. Ahmad moved to help them while keeping an eye on Mitchell. This is impossible, Mitchell muttered, raising his weapon toward Rachel. But Karim was faster. Free from his restraints, he lunged at Mitchell. Years of suppressed rage finally finding its proper target. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the air as both men crashed to the rooftop. Within moments, the other three operatives had surrounded Mitchell, their explosive vests deactivated by Hassan, who turned out to be a former military engineer. Dr. Morrison, Hassan called out in English. What should we do with him? Rachel looked at the 5 men who had come to kill her and were now waiting for her guidance. We turn him over to justice. Real justice, not revenge. As FBI tactical teams flooded onto the roof, Rachel realized that her career as just a translator was indeed over. But what was beginning was something entirely different. A role where linguistic understanding could bridge the gap between conflict and peace. 6 months later, Rachel stood before a congressional committee reviewing the intelligence failures that had allowed the engineer to operate for so long. Ahmad, Karim, Hassan, Mahmoud, and Faisal sat in the gallery, now working with the FBI to identify other victims of Thomas Brennan's operations. Dr. Morrison, the committee chairman asked, in your professional opinion, how do we prevent this kind of infiltration in the future? Rachel looked at the men in the gallery, then back at the committee. By remembering that understanding language isn't just about translating words. It's about understanding the people who speak them. When we listen not just to what people are saying, but to who they really are, we can tell the difference between genuine threats and manufactured ones. She paused, thinking about everything that had brought her to this moment. I was never just a translator. I was someone who believed that language could build bridges instead of walls. Sometimes, that means talking someone out of violence. Sometimes, it means talking them into hope. In the gallery, Ahmad nodded and whispered to his friends in Arabic. She spoke truth to us when we needed to hear it most. Rachel heard him perfectly and smiled. Some conversations, she had learned, were worth risking everything to have. 3 years later, the International Center for Linguistic Diplomacy occupied a modern building in Geneva, Switzerland. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Rachel could see delegates from 47 nations arriving for the Global Communications Security Summit. Her role as Director of Cross-Cultural Intelligence had brought her to this moment, leading an international effort to prevent intelligence manipulation through linguistic analysis. Dr. Morrison, her assistant Maria Santos, called from the doorway. The Syrian delegation has requested a private meeting before the main session. Rachel looked up from her preparation notes. The delegation included several officials she had never met in person, but whose voices she recognized from years of intercepted communications during more turbulent times. Schedule it for this afternoon, Maria, and please make sure we have native Arabic speakers available for cultural consultation. As Rachel walked through the center's halls, she passed offices where linguists from around the world worked on projects that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. Former intelligence operatives worked alongside former targets, using their combined expertise to identify and prevent the kind of manipulation that Thomas Brennan had perfected. Ahmad appeared in the hallway, now wearing a suit instead of maintenance coveralls. His transformation from would-be suicide bomber to Director of Middle Eastern Outreach had been one of the most remarkable aspects of the center's early success. Dr. Morrison, the Jordanian team has completed their analysis of the Tehran intercepts. You were right about the linguistic markers. They're definitely manufactured communications. Another Brennan-style operation? Similar methodology, but the execution is more sophisticated. Whoever is doing this learned from his mistakes. Rachel and Ahmad walked toward the main conference room, where representatives from intelligence agencies, linguistic departments, and conflict resolution organizations were gathering. The diversity of the group would have been unthinkable during her days in the basement of the DHS building. Ahmad, have you heard anything from Hassan's reconstruction project in Aleppo? The medical clinic opened last month. Hassan says teaching former fighters to become paramedics is like learning a new language. It requires complete retraining of how you think about other people. Rachel nodded, remembering how Hassan had described his decision to remove his explosive vest as the first time I chose to build instead of destroy. Agent Patterson entered the conference room, his hair now completely gray but his demeanor as sharp as ever. His role as senior advisor for counterintelligence had evolved to focus on the kind of interdisciplinary approach that had stopped the engineer. Dr. Morrison, we've received preliminary reports from 3 different continents about coordinated disinformation campaigns targeting linguistic minorities. The patterns suggest a new generation of operators using Brennan's playbook. Any voice pattern matches known operatives? That's where it gets interesting. Our analysis suggests these aren't traditional intelligence operatives. The linguistic sophistication indicates academic training, possibly university professors or researchers who've been recruited or compromised. Rachel felt a familiar chill. The engineer's legacy wasn't just his crimes, it was his methodology. His techniques for manipulating language and culture were apparently being adapted by others. Patterson, are we looking at a coordinated network or independent operations? That's what we need to determine, which is why the Secretary General specifically requested your involvement. The conference room filled with delegates as the session began. Rachel took her position at the main table, flanked by Ahmad and Patterson. Across from them sat representatives from the United Nations, the European Union, the African Union, and the Arab League. Secretary General Elizabeth Mueller called the session to order. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here because Dr. Morrison's work has demonstrated that linguistic manipulation represents a new category of international security threat. Dr. Morrison, would you please present your findings? Rachel activated the large display screen behind her. 3 years ago, we learned that a single individual with intelligence training and linguistic expertise could manipulate international relations by exploiting our assumptions about communication patterns. Today, we face evidence that this methodology is being systematically deployed by unknown actors. She clicked through a series of audio analyses. In the past 18 months, we've identified suspicious communication patterns in conflict zones across 4 continents. The sophistication suggests coordination, but the linguistic diversity suggests multiple operators with native-level fluency in different languages. Dr. Fatima al-Rashid from the Arab League delegation leaned forward. Dr. Morrison, are you suggesting that multiple individuals with Thomas Brennan's capabilities are operating simultaneously? Dr. al-Rashid, I'm suggesting something potentially more dangerous. The evidence indicates that someone is teaching Brennan's techniques to others. creating a network of linguistic manipulators who understand how to exploit cultural and religious differences for political purposes. Ahmad stood to address the assembly. Honorable delegates, I speak as someone who was manipulated by these techniques. The power of linguistic deception lies not just in false translation, but in exploiting authentic cultural grievances to serve inauthentic purposes. The Syrian delegate, Dr. Ammar Khoury, responded in Arabic before switching to English. Mr. Ahmad, your transformation has been remarkable, but how do we distinguish between legitimate cultural concerns and manufactured outrage? Rachel answered before Ahmad could respond. Dr. Khoury, that's precisely the challenge. Effective linguistic manipulation always contains elements of truth. The art lies in distinguishing between authentic voices and those who have been coached to sound authentic. She pulled up a new analysis on the screen. For example, we recently intercepted communications suggesting ethnic tensions in Central Asia. The linguistic patterns appeared genuine until we noticed that speakers were using formal academic vocabulary that didn't match their supposed educational backgrounds. Patterson added, Dr. Morrison's analysis revealed that multiple speakers had been trained to use specific terminology that would trigger intelligence algorithms while appearing to represent grassroots movements. The concerning element, Rachel continued, is that this training appears to be systematic and well-funded. Someone is investing significant resources in creating authentic-sounding false communications across multiple regions. Dr. Chen Wei from the Chinese delegation asked, Dr. Morrison, do you have theories about who might be conducting this training? Rachel hesitated, knowing that her next words would escalate the discussion significantly. Dr. Chen, our analysis suggests that the training incorporates methodologies from multiple intelligence agencies. This isn't the work of a single nation or organization. It's the work of someone who has had access to linguistic intelligence techniques from various sources. The room fell silent as delegates processed the implications. If Rachel was correct, they were dealing with an international criminal organization that had infiltrated multiple intelligence communities. Secretary General Mueller broke the silence. Dr. Morrison, what do you recommend as our response? Madam Secretary General, we need to create an international database of linguistic manipulation techniques, staffed by experts who understand both the technical and cultural aspects of these operations. But more importantly, we need to train intelligence analysts to think like linguists, and linguists to think like intelligence analysts. Ahmad stepped forward again. Honorable delegates, I would like to propose something additional. We should create exchange programs where former targets of manipulation, like myself, work directly with intelligence agencies to identify the psychological and cultural vulnerabilities that make these techniques effective. Dr. Al-Rashid nodded thoughtfully. Mr. Ahmad's suggestion has merit. Those who have experienced manipulation firsthand may be best positioned to recognize it in others. Rachel felt a sense of completion as she watched the discussion evolve. 3 years ago, she had been a translator working alone in a basement, analyzing communications after the fact. Now she was facilitating conversations that could prevent future manipulation campaigns before they began. Ladies and gentlemen, she concluded, the most powerful defense against linguistic manipulation is linguistic understanding. When we truly comprehend not just what people are saying, but the cultural, historical, and emotional contexts that shape how they say it, we can distinguish between authentic communication and sophisticated deception. As the formal session ended, delegates gathered in smaller groups to discuss implementation details. Rachel found herself approached by Dr. Khoury from the Syrian delegation. Dr. Morrison, I wanted to thank you personally. My cousin was Mahmoud, one of the men you spoke to on that rooftop. Rachel's eyes widened. Mahmoud is your cousin. He wrote to me about that day. He said you spoke to him not as an enemy, but as someone who understood his pain. That conversation changed not just his life, but our entire family's perspective on American intentions. Dr. Khoury, where is Mahmoud now? He's studying linguistics at Damascus University. He says he wants to learn to build bridges with language the way you did. As the day concluded, Rachel stood once again at the windows overlooking Geneva. Ahmad joined her, both of them watching delegates from around the world departing after a day of unprecedented cooperation. Dr. Morrison, do you think we can really prevent another engineer? Rachel considered the question carefully. Ahmad, I think we can do something better than prevent another engineer. I think we can create a generation of people who understand that language is too powerful to be used as a weapon. Ahmed smiled. In Arabic we have a saying, The tongue can be sharper than the sword, but it can also heal what the sword has wounded. Rachel nodded, thinking about the journey that had brought her from a basement translation booth to this moment of international cooperation. She had indeed never been just a translator. She had been someone who understood that in a world of increasing complexity and cultural misunderstanding, the ability to truly hear what others are saying and why they're saying it might be the most critical skill for preventing conflicts before they begin. The work was far from over, but for the first time since that night when she first heard suspicious communications about Baltimore, Rachel felt confident that language was being used to build understanding rather than exploit differences. And in a world where words could start wars or prevent them, that made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.